Well, joining us in the studio now is leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Richard, your body language through both of those interviews was quite fascinating. You had your head in your hands when we were talking about Rwanda and the blooming post office scandal that I know you feel really strongly about.
I mean, I do feel very strongly about both these issues. On Rwanda first, frankly, for Steve Tutwell there to say that he voted for the bill and it's going to work, give us a break. The country's switched off. It doesn't believe anything that this government is going to do with Rwanda. We hear about all this talk, they're going to march them up the hill and they're going to have this great rebellion. You mark my words, whenever the vote is, they'll all just quietly sort of simmer down. Bill Cash will sort of give some form of verification. It's OK, we've tweaked a word here, we've tweaked a word there. It'll mean nothing. Everybody knows in this country it's not a deterrent if you send a couple of hundred people to Rwanda when 30 to 40,000 people are coming across it. This is a complete dead cat red herring that's cost us £800 million. 500 million to the French, 300 million to Rwanda, and all we've sent there is 3 Home Secretaries. The whole thing is a complete waste of time.
And it does nothing, of course, Richard, to deal with legal migration, which is running, net migration, running over, 1.3 million?
Gross legal migration is running at about a city the size of Birmingham.
Yeah.
That's the context, whether it's 1.2, 1.3 million people coming in, depressing British wages, putting huge pressure on public services. It's not surprising housing rents are going up. It's not surprising you can't get a GP's appointment if every year 1.25 million people are arriving. And so you've got that. And then you've got this post office and Fujitsu scandal, which, I mean, it takes a lot to make me cry. I watched that thing. I was in tears 3 times. I was in tears on Monday night when I was on a different channel talking about this with one of the victims. It's worse than awful. Just before Christmas, this was discussed in the House of Commons. We've all known about this. MPs blathering on about it. How many people were in the House of Commons?
About 6, I think.
6. Honestly, for them now to start saying it's an outrage, they have utterly failed the postmasters. Utterly, utterly failed. I'm calling for 3 things, and I think there may be a slide available for this. First of all, absolutely, there should be a law passed next week in Parliament that overturns all of the convictions. They're all unsafe. 700 plus are unsafe. So do that immediately. Don't wait for judges to take years to overturn these. That's simply unacceptable. Secondly, taxpayers should not be footing the bill.
I agree.
Right? The government must announce that it's going to sue Fujitsu for, I've calculated, about £500 million. They're all on the line. This was their system. They lied to the post office. There we are. There are the 3 things. Firstly, you've got to have urgent legislation. Secondly, the government's got to sue Fujitsu. And thirdly, absolutely, the company bosses of the post office and Fujitsu must face criminal trial. They lied. And I've read the massive judgment in 2019, in December 19, and the judge there, he said that he clearly felt that the post office bosses and the Fujitsu bosses lied in court. And he said it was the 21st equivalent of believing that the earth is flat. Those were his exact written words. This is really serious stuff.
Very serious.
And the coziness that's going on, the links between government and the top bosses in Fujitsu, some of whom, by the way, have given hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds donations to the Conservative Party.
And the FT's reporting today, Richard, I think since all this blew up, the problems were what started being identified in 2009. I think since 2016, £3.6 billion in new contracts for Fujitsu. Astonishing.
So what's going on here is that actually it's too big to fail. It's a bit like the Carillion disaster, OK, where the links between the two are so huge. Oh, and by the way, do you remember when the NHS contract failed and the IT company
under Gordon
sued
Brown.
them? Who was the IT company that sued the NHS for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of £1 million? Yes, Fujitsu.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
And the taxpayer lost
if I was in charge, I would say to Fujitsu, you pay up now or you'll never get another contract with this country ever again.
Well, there was footage on social media yesterday of Tony Blair actually announcing how trustworthy this Horizon system was. I don't know whether you saw that.
It does go back a very, very, very long, I think back to 2002.
Just apply the common sense test, right? How many postmasters, before this system came into place, right, were charged with nicking tens and tens and tens of thousands of pounds? you could probably count them on literally on the fingers of your hand. Right? All of a sudden, they're being charged with having nicked 40, 50, 80,000 quid. Give us a break. That was almost the turnover of the shop, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
It was basic, failed the common sense test. It's an outrage.
What about Venables and her bonus, Richard? Bev thinks I'm being too cruel. I think she should repay her bonus.
I'd rather see her in court.
I'd rather see her in court. But here's the point, and you touched on it in the introduction. When many of these people remortgaged their homes in order to pay the losses to the post office, but the post office hadn't lost the money in the first place, so they declared it as profits.
They did.
So they've banked all of this cash as their own profits, on the back of which she's been paid a bonus.
That's right.
And many, many others. This goes all the way to the top, up and up and up, and the top of Fujitsu. And they've all got to face trial. There has to be a proper day of reckoning, because, you know, people in their communities, in your hamlets, your villages, your market towns, you trust two things. You used to trust the police, and you would trust the post office, the postmaster. And if that trust is broken and you can't trust the post office, what's left?
And some of those postmasters and postmistresses said one of the hardest things was their collapse in esteem in their local community, people looking the other way because they thought they'd been pinching their money.
Their money.
Can we ask you about what Nigel Farage said about the Reform Party and about the fact that he thinks Labour is going to be in power for the next 10 years? You must have been delighted with him saying that.
No, look, I've highlighted at my press conference last week, which was actually very well received, apart from a couple of, I think, slightly inexperienced broadcasters, who thought I was reading an autocue when I was speaking from the heart, from the passion, but you didn't spot that. I don't know what...
You weren't passionate enough for me, Richard.
I was full of passion. Everyone else loved it. It was all over the press. But anyway... too long. 14 minutes, Andrew.
Too long.
14 minutes.
I'd have done 1 minute preamble, 8 bullet points. This is what I'm doing. Sat down.
I did 10 bullet points, and it took 14 minutes. And the press loved it.
Too long.
The press
do you know how many
did
press
love
there?
it.
They did love it, and there were 50 press there. There weren't many people watching the Lib Dem poster unvailing down in Guildford.
But in all seriousness, much ruder about that. Let me
We
tell you.
were.
In all seriousness, no. You're absolutely right. You've got to criticise and challenge, and that's the whole point, of course. Look, in all seriousness, we highlighted that Starmageddon is a serious threat to the country. But so is a continuation of the people who have broken this country, which is this current regime. So both of them represent, I'm saying, high taxes, high wasteful government spending, daft regulations, we haven't taken advantage of the Brexit opportunities, mass immigration that no one voted for, and the vast burden, job-destroying burden of the cost of net zero. You cannot grow an economy with those burdens. It's as simple as that.
And that's the only way he says he can do what he wants to do, Starmer, the £28 billion a year splurge on green projects,
well, look, the truth
by achieving growth.
You can't grow an economy with those burdens, the cost of that. And every year we are borrowing way more than we are earning. And eventually you run out of money. And I tell you, I'm highlighting that day is coming. I'm
looking at Matt Goodwin, one of the pollsters familiar to this channel, who's done a bit of a deep dive into where Conservative voters are going. And he thinks that about 15% of those 2019 Tories who voted for Boris Johnson, mainly older pro-Brexit, are defecting to Reform. How are you going to bring over the younger voters, Richard, as well?
Yeah, look, we've got to appeal to as many people as possible. Young voters are being utterly shafted by the housing crisis caused by mass immigration. So we've got to freeze that. That'll make a big difference there. And the second thing is far too many young people are being conned to go to the Ponzi scheme of universities, racking up 40 to 50 grand in debt. I mean, it's an absolute outrage. So we've got clear proposals to have zero interest on the student loans. At the moment, when you come out of university, unless you're earning £60,000, you won't even get on top of the interest before starting to repay the capital.
And it's pointless having this interest, because they owe 140 billion, Richard, the student loan.
No, it's way more than that. It's now 230 billion.
We need to move on. And you're not taxing anyone till you earn 20k. I think that's very persuasive for the young voter.
And that's a critical point.
Right, Richard, good to see you.